This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
America gripped by protests after another brutal night in which demonstrators gathered to demand justice for George Floyd. Attack in northern Burkina Faso kills at least 15. And Egypt's forced to switch back to normal operating hours. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live here on CGTN. I'm Mahia Muta in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, Southern African Development Community calls for enhanced cross-border trade. And Nigeria's nightlife dwindles amid coronavirus restrictions. Well, tensions are running high in the United States amid outrage over the death of an African-American man in police custody. Protests have erupted in more than 30 cities across at least 20 states. Some rallies have turned violent with clashes between demonstrators and the police. In the city of Atlanta, protesters vandalized buildings, including the CNN headquarters. The White House was also forced into a brief lockdown. George Floyd died after a Minnesota police officer knelt on his neck during an arrest. The officer has since been charged with murder. Well, our correspondent Dan Williams has an update on the ground in Minneapolis.
Here in Minneapolis, there was a curfew that was put in place, but that simply was not obeyed in any which way or form. Now, just as night fell, we saw lines of police and the National Guard around, guarding around the 3rd Police Precinct. That's the precinct that was set alight on Thursday evening. And it seemed as though it perhaps would be a more of a peaceful evening, that there were some protesters, but perhaps not in the numbers. But then we just saw as night fell that really all changed, and we saw protesters suddenly sweep through, the National Guard, the police then suddenly moving back and allowing essentially the protesters to walk freely through whichever way they wanted. And then that followed a chain of reactions where we saw looting, we saw also buildings set on fire once again. Another night of violence here on the streets of Minneapolis, and of course that violence has now also escalated and expanded throughout many other cities across the United States. It's clear that there is real outrage following the events of Monday, and really as we stand here today, very few signs that outrage will in any way be calmed down, and there's real fears of a further weekend now of further violence across the United States.
Well, Minnesota is requesting 1,000 more soldiers from the National Guard to help bring down the riots. Earlier, Governor Tim Walz urged protesters to go home.
I myself can fully understand the rage. I spoke this evening to George Floyd's siblings quite extensively. I understand that rage. We've talked about it. We understand what has to happen. What's going on out there right now is not that. I'm deeply concerned with the people who you need to go home. You need to go home. The purpose of this, and we're seeing it spread up across the country, is making it more difficult to get to the point where we can deal with these issues.
At least 15 people have died in northern Burkina Faso following an attack on a convoy transporting traders. Several others were wounded during the incident. Official reports indicate that many more remain unaccounted for. The strike took place in the province of Loroum around 5 p.m. local time. At least 4 women were among the dead. 2 lorries were also burnt in the commotion. The country has been battling armed combatants with links to terrorist groups since 2017. On Thursday, the armed forces reported that they had destroyed a militant camp in another province, still in the north. 10 assailants and 1 soldier died during the operation. Moving on to the coronavirus pandemic now, there are over 6 million cases globally. Africa has recorded more than 136,000 cases with over 56,000 recoveries. The continent has reported nearly 4,000 deaths as well. The number of infections and deaths in Africa is much lower than the United States, Europe and Latin America, but scientists have questioned the figures because of low testing rates in the region. Several countries in southern and eastern Africa have reported a significant upward trend in daily cases over the past week. That includes Kenya and South Africa. Kenya has reported 143 new cases. There are now over 1,800 cases in the country. In South Africa, teachers' unions and governing associations have urged their staff to defy a government order to return to schools come next week. They say that the institutions have not yet received personal protective equipment to keep students and employees safe. The country is set to reopen its economy in June following the gradual easing of restrictions after 2 months of lockdown. Northern Africa has nearly half the cases reported on the continent. Egypt is the most affected country in this region. Starting today, it will begin implementing new measures to curb the spread of the virus. The new controls will continue for 15 days. Well, now the Council of Ministers of the Southern African Development Community has concluded a virtual meeting to consider a range of regional development and cooperation issues. These include taking coordinated action to address the impact of COVID-19 in the region. The meeting was held in Dar es Salaam and was chaired by the country's Minister of Foreign Affairs. CGTN's Isaac Lucando has more.
Solving challenges resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic featured heavily in the discussions for SADC ministers. The smooth transportation of goods and services in the region is now their priority.
That we now address these challenges to ensure that we have a flow of products and essential services as fast as possible. In the execution, there have been long queues, delays of vehicles and other things that need to be worked on.
The SADC region had set guidelines for trade during the COVID-19 pandemic. In a bid to stop the spread of the virus, some countries resorted to border closures, causing disruptions to trade.
The SADC Council of Ministers is keen on easing the transportation of goods and services in Southern Africa. It sees it as a means of feeding its people, keeping businesses going in the region, and reducing the negative effects of the COVID-19 pandemic.
In order to achieve this, the ministers have agreed on protecting those who transport the goods, but also taking the necessary precautions.
It should not be a source of spreading the virus, and we have all agreed that these drivers should be handled with respect, respecting their humanity and acknowledging the difficult job they do. This has been unanimously agreed.
The ministers agree that the pandemic will have short, medium and long-term negative impacts on all social and economic sectors in the region. Just how well they navigate these effects remains to be seen. Isaac Lucando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
Nigeria says it will continue its clinical trials of hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for COVID-19. This is despite the WHO's temporary suspension of testing the anti-malarial drug. CGTN's Kelechi Emekalam has more from Abuja.
The World Health Organization recently called for caution in the use of hydroxychloroquine on COVID-19 patients. Nigeria says it will continue to examine the drug's potential after data shows it's been effective on patients, especially those with mild symptoms. This is coming as Nigeria and the world seek possible treatments and cures for the novel coronavirus.
Well, it has not been agreed that it's a treatment for COVID-19 infection. What we have had severally is that there have been some good results from patients who are COVID-19 positive and use chloroquine. However, for you to be able to scientifically prove that it actually works, there are some levels of clinical trials that you have to pass through.
But the drug isn't the only option Nigeria is open to. The Food and Drug Administration and Control says the country is exploring other homegrown remedies, but it's doing this with caution and adhering to necessary protocols.
We neglected herbal medicine research for years, for decades. We are secretive as a culture. My own parents or grandparents died with their knowledge, have a lot of good herbal plants, but we've neglected it. We have what it takes in this country. Not for COVID necessarily, but including COVID. We don't know yet whether something can work for COVID. It has to be tested. It has to be researched into. So that is what we are encouraging our researchers and practitioners to submit to us what they think may work.
I think it's a welcome development, except that Nigerians should not be gullible enough that think that the fact that we've started this, then it means that it will certainly work. Thousands and one investigation or tests or clinical trials are going on different formulation, which may also include herbal mixture. So,
about 4 research projects have so far been submitted for further analysis and testing. Nigeria has also procured Madagascar's herbal mixture for COVID-19, following claims that several patients recovered after being treated with the remedy. Authorities reveal that the plant used in Madagascar's remedy also grows in Nigeria. And like Madagascar, Nigeria wants to look within for its own solution. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Now, recently, the third session of the 13th National People's Congress of China voted and passed national security legislation for Hong Kong. The move has been supported by South African politicians. Officials of the country's African National Congress have expressed the point that Hong Kong is an integral part of China. More so, the passing of the national security legislation by the National People's Congress of China is in a bid to maintain Hong Kong's security and stability. They say Hong Kong should therefore remain an internal affair with no interference from external forces.
Because Hong Kong is an integral part of China now. It put laws which deal with any unlawlessness, disruption in the economy, and anarchy. And China, of course, this reverting back of Hong Kong to China's control is a long-standing resolution which was entered to after the Chinese Revolution, that Hong Kong will revert back to China as part of China, because it have always been a part of China. So there's nothing wrong in doing that, and it's actually up to Chinese government to do that. There's no international or external interference which is needed. That is a domestic matter of the Chinese people and government.
We have seen certain upheavals in Hong Kong over the recent past. So the special emphasis on Hong Kong becomes crucial. It's also important for China to maintain that Hong Kong is a part of China.
You're watching Africa Live on CGTN. Here's what's coming up after this short break. Egypt's bourse to switch back to normal operating hours. And in Nigeria, nightlife dwindles amid coronavirus restrictions.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there to see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back. Let's get you some business news now. The Egyptian exchange is switching back to operating during its listed normal trading hours from Sunday. For the past month, the stock exchange had reduced its operating time by an hour. The latest step comes as the country gradually reopens its economy that's been hard hit by the coronavirus outbreak. CGTN's Adel Makhroui with more.
The Egyptian stock market will, from this week, operate normally. Trading in all indexes will take place daily from 10 in the morning until 2:30 in the evening, instead of ending operations at 1:30 p.m. due to the anti-COVID-19 restrictions. Egypt is decreasing its curfew time by 3 hours, taking the first step in its COVID-19 coexisting program.
The bourse interacts with surrounding economic developments. It's also an indication that the bourse has confidence to open up all restrictions over trading. In the past period, foreign investors have been exiting the stock market, which has seen a revival in local trading. The month of May has a kind of uptrend, and we were among very few markets in the world witnessing that.
During the past month, EGX 30 has only gained 300 points. It's not much, but at least Egypt's prime stock market indicator has stopped its COVID-19 freefall. Supported by the government's decision to gradually open up the economy this week, experts are projecting a good trading week.
Quarter one results have seen some blue chips exceeding last year's quarter one growth, but overall companies have seen profit losses from 7 to 20%, which are not dramatic changes. Our main target now is not getting an uptrend in indexes. We want to maintain trading activity, high financial liquidity in order to diminish the market existing amongst foreigners. We need a dynamic market where investors easily enter and exit without concerns. All of this should see a good recovery with the opening up policy.
The year has begun with EGX 30 opening at 13,960 points. Panic caused by the COVID-19 pandemic has seen it plummet to 8,750 points in March. Banks too are increasing their operation hours this week. They will be open for the public daily until 3 o'clock instead of 1:30 p.m., which is still 2 hours short than their pre-COVID-19 working hours. Overall, the Egyptian financial market is getting some good news for the first time in over 2 months. Adel Makhroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Now, even though commercial activities resumed 3 weeks ago in Nigeria, schools, bars and cinemas remain shut. This is aimed at preventing large gatherings and to contain the spread of the coronavirus. The West African country's once a buzzing nightlife and the people working in the industry face an uncertain path forward amid the ongoing restrictions. CGTN's Tuli Shabalala takes a look.
For the last 3 years, Sensei Uche has earned a living from Nigeria's entertainment industry. Each night in Lagos, Uche would be the hype man, standing alongside a DJ in bars and clubs and made people dance. But his source of income was cut off for several months. In late March, Nigeria's government shut down bars, nightclubs and restaurants to curb the spread of the coronavirus.
It's been weird, because for me and for everyone that's in the line of business, that I am in also, our lives were turned upside down, like literally just turned upside down on its head. Now we have to start thinking if this would become our reality, if the partial reopening would become what we'll have to be dealing with every weekend.
Like many entertainers worldwide, Uche has begun playing his skills online. He works alongside a DJ making music for isolation parties during the weekends. But the online parties only keep his brand alive and don't pay him hard cash. It's not just Uche who is feeling the pinch. The problem is shared by bar and club owners.
Lagos is not complete, that's nightlife, and it's even much bigger than just Cubana Group. A whole lot of other businesses that complement and contribute to the GDP of the state, through events and nightlife and concerts and the rest of it. So I think the state is bleeding money, the business are bleeding money. So everybody will come to a compromise as to how to help make sure we don't keep people unemployed.
Uche hopes scientists will find a medical breakthrough soon.
If we don't find this vaccine in time, this business is going to suffer. It really is. People are already suffering. So yeah, that's my biggest fear. I just hope that we can find the vaccine in time so that we don't make this the new normal.
So he and many others can return to their once buzzing nightlife and source of livelihood. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
And here's what's coming up in sport.